Hey, there's a chick on my app.
All right, I'm just saying women aren't meant to fight. They have tiny, hollow bones.
Don't you think you're doing a lot of genderizing?
What?
Don't be a pussy. Join Cobra Kai.
I was a natural cobra.
I'm here with Emily Marie Palmer. You play Betsy on Cobra Kai season 3 in the Young Kreese flashbacks. And I'm really excited to have you on here. I love having another woman on here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm so glad you reached out, and it was so refreshing and exciting to see a female-led podcast in this space. That's unique and awesome.
Yeah, so actually I was just checking out your Instagram just in preparation for this, and the first thing I saw and that I need to talk about is your music, because it is so lovely. It's such a refreshing kind of music to be listening to. And it's like a folky type of genre, I would say. I don't know if that's exactly what you would consider it, but
it is.
You just have this breathy, like ethereal sound, and it's so lovely, and it's not something I hear all the time.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. My folk is really how I would classify the music that I write, and that's kind of, I grew up with my mom singing me lullabies that were really old folk songs that like her mother and grandmother had sung to her. And so it's kind of part of my like culture and my ancestry, as well as just a kind of music that I really love. And so it makes me really, really happy when people connect with it or love it too. So thank you so much for the kind words.
Oh, you're welcome. I would not compliment you if I didn't love it. And I love all types of music, and it's just not one that you hear often enough anymore. So I was wondering where you got, I mean, obviously, you just said your mom, but what artists did you listen to that kind of cultivated that track for you?
Yeah, I guess the desire or the proclivity to write that kind of music really just came naturally. It wasn't something that I like had a favorite artist and I wanted to write things like them. It really probably was mostly just because I grew up loving it. And I've always loved songs that tell stories. There's something about those old folk songs, and they change over time too. And that's really, really fascinating to me. And so many of my ancestors on that side of my family were really poor, uneducated people. And so these folk songs were like their history books. They were the people that their stories didn't make it into history books. They didn't do these big grand things that shaped history in that way, but they were able to tell and preserve their stories through song. And I just always really loved that. It felt like this secret. I don't know. It felt like a secret that was passed on, like these stories that not just everyone knew. It was, you got it passed down to you from someone. And so it was probably mostly that influenced my writing. But there are tons of great folk artists that I really love. One is Leonard Cohen. He was a big influence once I discovered him a few years ago. And I also love, there's an Irish singer-songwriter named Kate Rusby, and Joan Baez. She's a great, beautiful folk artist too. But I'm kind of like you. I really like all genres. I love folk music, but it's not like I only listen to that. It just is what comes most naturally to me to write. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, maybe I should make music that's a little more mainstream. Instead, I write these like 5-minute long songs, and it just brings me a lot of joy when anybody likes them, because they are kind of like strange and definitely outside the mainstream sound. But yeah, it makes me really happy when I hear that people do connect with them and love them. And so yeah, I think to answer that question really mostly probably comes from the fact that, like, I remember, I don't know how old I was, maybe 2 or 3, but I remember the first time I heard this one particular song. It's one of my favorites. It's called Barbary Ellen, and it's this old like 15 verse long folk song. And I remember the first time my mom sang it to me at night, and I just like, all of a sudden, instead of like falling asleep to this lullaby, I was like wide awake, because I just was so entranced by this song and the story, and it was just so beautiful. And there's something about folk songs that are really good about like being beautiful and inspiring, while also like not shying away from tragedy and really dark sides of life. And I like that about the music as well. And I try to encapsulate that in my music. But so far I actually only have two of my own singles released. I have a ton of music that I've written, but I haven't been able to record it yet. So far there's just a couple things and then a lot of like 1 minute Instagram videos that I've made. But yeah, hopefully that kind of answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And something that I find so funny is growing up, I was really interested in like punk and alternative music, which is completely different, but for the same reasons of like, I just
Mm,
loved the stories that they told and the messages that they were giving off. And I think a lot of
mhm.
people kind of get where punk is coming from in the wrong way, where a lot of the music was about like telling you, it's okay not to be okay, or, life is
Yeah,
terrible, but we get through it and we move on. And so there was always like a story and a message. And some of like the ones that
yeah.
stand out the most to me are like the ballads that, detail this whole story. Like the one that comes to mind when I think about folk music, and like the closest that it could come is like there's this Mayday Parade song, and it details the whole life of this girl that he loved, and how
Oh,
like life just kept handing them terrible situations, and eventually she ended up dying. And so like the
mm,
whole in each verse is like a different story.
mm.
And that really reminded me, and that's actually the first time I probably listened to a folk artist was after that. So
Oh, I love that. That's so fascinating to me. I love that. And it's so there's something about folk music that like it's easy to dismiss it and be like, oh, that's like boring, music from hundreds of years ago. But it's so relevant. There's something so contemporary about it too. And I seriously think you could take folk lyrics and put them to something like punk or alternative and make something really beautiful out of it. And it sounds like that's what you're describing. So that's awesome.
yeah, I mean, I just love your whole aesthetic too. I just feel like you're that person that reads the classic literature and has seen all of like the classic, like the black and white films. I feel like that kind of is your vibe. And I'm all
You're
about
so sweet. Thank you so much. I do love classic literature. I do love old movies. I'm not as cultured as I would like to be. There's definitely a lot of great classic things I've never seen, unfortunately, and never read, but that definitely is I'm very flattered. Thank you.
Well, I just find it so funny that then ended up being the one female character in the period piece section of Cobra Kai. Was that
Yeah.
something that you chose to audition for because of that, or?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, I would have been all about any character that I got an audition for in Cobra Kai. This was just the first opportunity that came up, and I was thrilled. And had it been a character in the contemporary part of Cobra Kai, I would have been thrilled to audition as well. I just got really lucky that there was this, uniquely period role in Cobra Kai, and yeah, it really was just the opportunity came along and I would have happily taken an opportunity to try out for any other role, but I'm really glad it was Betsy.
Yeah, so obviously like the Young Kreese section was supposed to be this big secret that we did not know about.
Mhm.
So what was your audition process like? Did they tell you what you were auditioning for? Did you like piece it together?
Yeah, I had to piece it together. Then I think the name Betsy was still in it, but Young Kreese, I can't remember what they named him. It was some other fake name. It wasn't Young Kreese. Um, and they have like the whole. If you remember in the flashback scene, there's the kind of misdirect where at first they're kind of playing it like David, the bully, might be Kreese, and he's saying like no, show no mercy, and all of these kind of clues, making you think that it is Kreese, but when I taped it, my fiance actually knew more about Karate Kid than I do, and so he was reading it and he was like, "Wait, like show no mercy." He knew instantly, like maybe this like the young Kreese character, and so he started helping me like put it together, and we still weren't totally sure. We did kind of eventually, just based on the scene, put it together that young Kreese was who he was, and we were like, oh, this character must be his, long lost love, his unrequited love. But it was, to answer your question, pretty secretive, and it wasn't. I didn't get to like read the full script or anything. It was just these are the scenes, put these on tape, and so I had to kind of try to fill in the gaps on my own. um, yeah.
So I mean, yes, it was kind of a secret, but also there were a comic book series that got released where they do show a flashback to Kreese and Betsy. So I'm curious, did you know about that? Did you pose? Because it kind of looks like you. Were you cast and then that was created, or the opposite? Were you cast because you looked like her?
It was the first version. Yeah. So that comic book didn't come out until a little bit after we filmed season 3. I want to say it came out in like the end of 2019 or beginning of 2020. I can't remember when exactly, but yeah, when I found it later, after months and months after I'd already filmed, I discovered I saw that comic book, and I thought like, oh no, I didn't know there was this whole comic book, and I should have done like character preparation. I should have studied it, because I thought it had come out in like the 80s or something. So I was worried when I found it. Like, I didn't know there was all this backstory to Betsy, but it turns out that it was made by the creators of Cobra Kai, and they actually, after Barrett, who plays Young Kreese, after he and I were cast, they sent our photos and images to like their illustrators, and so the characters were kind of drawn using us as inspiration so that it'd be consistent with the series. So to answer your question, it was less that I was cast based off the comic book, and kind of the opposite. They made the comic book after Barrett and I, which was so crazy to me.
That's so cool. You're like in a comic book. That's insane.
Yeah.
So when you did find it, like, what was the initial reaction there? Did you, because I would have just sent it to everybody. I would have been like, look at me, I'm in a comic book.
I can't remember exactly what happened first, but there is you're probably familiar with Cobra Kai Kid, who has a YouTube channel, and he had made a video kind of predicting that Betsy would be in season 3, and I think my mom, it was either my sister or my mom who found that first, and they were like, someone has like pieced this together, because I'd already filmed at that point, but it was still under wraps and hadn't been released, and my mom or someone found that, and they were like, someone pieced this together from this comic book, this is so cool, they know you're going to be in this, and not me specifically, but Betsy. And so that was the first time I had seen it, and that was when I had that realization, like, oh no, there's this comic book that I didn't get to like read and learn about Betsy, and maybe there would have been interesting information in there. And then after that, a few months later, another sister, her husband's really into Cobra Kai, and he I guess had found the comic book somehow, because she texted me. She was like, did you know that your character, there's a comic book version of your character, and sent it to me. But at that point I still didn't know that it was based off of Barrett and I, and drawn after we filmed season 3. So that, when I finally found that out, it was just a few months ago after season 3 came out, and yeah, my mind was blown. Like, how cool to get to be part of Cobra Kai, and then to have this piece of Cobra Kai lore just that you're part of forever. That's really, really exciting and magical to me.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't even know. That's so funny.
I had no clue.
That's so great. Oh my gosh. And back to the period piece stuff, because I'm really curious. What was it like in the costume design room, and like getting to kind of put together this look? Because you're playing a character from the 60s, which is obviously a very different look than the modern cast.
It was so fun, and I love all things vintage, and I don't dress like I'm from the 60s, but I love to dress in ways that are kind of vintage inspired. And so to me, the wardrobe fitting was just like a dream. Getting to wear these beautifully, curated looks was just so exciting. And the costume team were awesome. I honestly, every single different look, when you go in for a fitting, usually you try on anywhere from 3 to 5 different options, and then they take pictures and send them off to the director and producer and get approval on them. And some shows it's like you go in and you try them on, and there's really one that you're like, oh, I hope they choose that one because I didn't like the others. But honestly, with Betsy, every single thing they had, I was in love with, and thought it was so cute, and just really, like, when you have such great creative collaboration between all of the departments, it really helps as an actor. Like, the fact that I just felt like Betsy's wardrobe suited her character so well, it made it even easier to embody her and to bring that character to life. And so I only have all of the most positive things to say about the Cobra Kai wardrobe department. They're awesome.
So awesome. Your looks were so like they were just so cute. Like I don't even know how else to describe
Thanks.
them. They were so perfect. Um
Yeah.
and you got to do so many cool things. Well, I mean, you were probably on the set for what, 1 or 2 days, right? It wasn't a long
Yeah.
shoot. Uh,
Yeah, it was supposed to be 1 day, and then with some weather issues causing a delay, it ended up being 2 days, so not very long.
yeah, and you got to do just the coolest things. You got to ride in the car, in the banana boat car.
Yeah.
And you got to like, oh, so cool. By the way, I'm having a mental moment of thinking about riding in that car.
So
And you
cool.
got to do most of your scenes with Jesse, Kove, and Barrett.
Mhm.
So what was that experience like? Because all three of you were new to this Cobra Kai family in season 3.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, honestly, it was so good. My only wish is that it could have been longer, because it's at least for me, it takes me a while to like get my bearings and warm up. I'm fairly extroverted, but I have an introverted side too, and it can take me a minute to just like acclimate. And when you're new on the set, you're just taking in so much. It's like sensory overload. There's so many new people that you're meeting, and so I just wish I had more time. But it was such a good experience, and um yeah, all just really, really positive. Like I've talked about in other interviews, the whole vibe on the Cobra Kai set just very much felt like an entire crew of people, of from the producers to the production assistants to the actors, everyone in between just really feels like they were excited to be there, and they were working on a project they were happy to be part of creating and bringing to life. And that makes such a difference. Like when that I've been on sets where that feeling very much isn't there, and on Cobra Kai it definitely is. Like it just has such a fun spirit about the whole project. So yeah, my only my only regret about it was that it didn't last longer, just because it was so much fun.
Oh my gosh. Did you get to meet Martin Kove? Because I know he was kind of around during some of those Young Kreese scenes.
Yeah, I did meet him. And we didn't talk a whole lot. I just briefly met him, but he a couple times when we were kind of sitting waiting between setups, between filming, then he was talking a lot with Barrett, and it was so fun to get, to watch them. For Barrett, this obviously was a huge dream come true, and getting to play this iconic role, and so it was just really fun. And I think for Martin too, I mean, this was really exciting to see like this character that's been a part of his life for so long, and really definitive character in his career, getting to see the story expand and be fleshed out in this way in the series. So it was really fun just to watch both of them talk and swap stories and get to know each other. And it was, yeah, just great to get to be like a fly on the wall and listen to be part of something that is such a dream come true, really, for both of them. Was really fun for me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and Barrett did such a good job with the role, and it was so
He
cool to
did.
just see that story get expanded and unpacked in a way that we've never gotten before. It just gave him so much depth as
Yeah.
a character. Um,
Yeah.
Now, your character, on the other hand, we don't get to see too much, and then it's
Yeah.
revealed later that by the commanding officer that Betsy's died, but we're not really too sure on the details of that.
I
There's a lot
know.
of there's a lot of theories out there. There's a lot of fan speculation about whether you're dead or alive, or what's
Yeah.
going on with your character. And I know obviously season 4 is still being shot right now. There's not a lot you can say about it, but I want to know if there's like a ridiculously crazy fan theory out there that you've heard that has like stuck in your mind.
Honestly, there are so many there's so many theories. I can't keep track of like all of the threads of what might have happened to her, or where she might be now. And honestly, one of the crazier ones I've heard is that she is Amanda's mother. So she's Sam's grandmother. I feel like that one's one of the crazier ones. Maybe the most popular one seems to be that she's Tori's grandmother. So there's this connection between Kreese and Tori, and um, that's the most popular one, and maybe the most likely one. I really don't know. I have a feeling that if there is more, because they did leave us kind of with this mystery. We really don't know. I mean, they say that she's dead, like you said, but it's kind of left inconclusive. And I kind of think that if Betsy either is alive or maybe she's not still alive in the present Cobra Kai story, but she didn't actually die right then. There's just a whole lot of possibility. We really don't know, but I kind of think that whatever it may be, it may be something that's going to surprise all the fans. It might be something that no one has decided or thought of. There's just so many things it could have been. That letter that the commanding officer says, like, oh, we don't want to distract him with this. It could have been anything. It could have been that she wanted to end their relationship, or it could have been that she was pregnant, or there's so many things it could have been. We really only have that one person's word saying that she died. But so yeah, I'm with all of you all. I don't know. I'm like, I want to know the answer as well.
Yeah, there's also just that big timeline jump to the scene where he does get that letter. So you don't actually know, maybe that was a letter from a long time ago, because obviously, like, mail at that time took a long time to come in. So that could have been from months and months ago. So she could have been pregnant, because, if you add the timeline up, there's no way in that moment she could have just realized she was so you have to do a lot of math that I'm just not willing to do as a human being in order to try to piece it together. So I'm just going to wait and see, like everybody else, and not try to insert myself in the speculation.
You're not going to have a big chalkboard with all of these theories.
Oh my gosh. I'm just picturing like a chalkboard, like How I Met Your Mother style, or like in any of those like superhero shows where they have all the different yarns stretched across. No, that's not going to be me.
Let's just let the producers and the writers do that work for us.
I trust them. I trust them to surprise me. I like being surprised. So I'm all good with not trying to come up with a conspiracy.
Yes, and I feel like they've proven that this story is in such great hands, and they do their research, and they have taken this. I mean, this show has taken the world by storm, so I just feel like we should trust them completely to do with Betsy's storyline the right thing, and something maybe surprising and interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us creators out there, we say something like, in the big three we trust, or stuff like that. We're not big fans of spoilers over here. So yeah. I absolutely trust them. Were there any, because you do have not like the most screen time, were there scenes that you guys shot that didn't make it in, or was there like expanded versions of any of those scenes?
There weren't. Really, the only thing that got cut from what was in the actual shooting script of the episode was just the fight scene. Very, very minor thing, but because of weather, obviously it's an outdoor scene, and we had this big thunderstorm roll in, and because of that we had to take long breaks, like for safety reasons. We had, every time there was a lightning strike, we'd have to hold for 30 minutes, and so we'd be at like 29 minutes of holding, and then another lightning strike would happen, and we'd have to hold for another 30 minutes, and so that just like kept pushing it so far to where we weren't sure. There was a time we weren't sure that we were even going to be able to finish the fight scene. They did manage to like barely eke it out and get everything they needed. But originally there had been just a really minor thing, but Betsy was a little bit more involved, and I was supposed to kind of actually like physically jump on David and get like shoved down to the ground and kind of hurt, and I wish that could have happened, just because I feel like that's so in keeping with her character. And even though she's gentle and compassionate, she's willing to stand up and say like, no, this isn't good, and stand up for what's right. And so I wish that could have been put in there, just because I feel like it was so true to who she is. And ultimately, just because of time, we had to lose it. So it was really just that. Almost everything else got shot exactly as it was in the script. But when I auditioned, there was the scene where I am sending him off to war, off getting onto the bus. That scene was, I want to say, a couple pages in the audition. And I think that was really just, so they could get a better sense for the actors auditioning for them, and maybe give a little more insight into the characters and their relationship. So my audition scene was longer, and obviously in the context of the actual episode, it's perfect to be a short little scene. And we didn't, on set, we didn't shoot any of those 2 pages. We just shot what you see in the episode. So yeah, for the most part, it all made it in there. There's no footage floating around out there with Betsy in it that that the world hasn't seen.
I would have loved to see some stunt work from you. That would have been fun. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of at the end of the second Karate Kid when her name is escaping me.
Kumiko?
When Kumiko, yes, when Kumiko like jumps on I'm losing all my names. Who's the villain character in the second? Chosen, yes. When Kumiko jumps on Chosen and she's trying to like, intervene, it kind of reminded me of that moment. And I would have loved to have gotten my like Kumiko girl power moment, but
it probably honestly was drawn off of that. A lot of times the big three put in little Easter eggs for us. So that's probably where the idea even came from.
That could be. That's a good point.
Yeah. Kind of moving on from the show a little bit, I want to talk about some of your theater work and some short films. You did a short film, but something that I was really fascinated by is that you studied theater in Paris for a while.
Yeah, it was just a semester of school. It's this it's an international training school, and so you can go do like a diploma of like 1-year programs or 3-year programs, but I just did one specific certificate. So I spent a semester there, and it's a mostly like movement and physicality based school. It's a great, place to train if you are a theater artist or any other kind of actor or performer. But the man who runs the school is kind of like world renowned in clowning circles. So he's like a famous clown. And I mean that in the sense that he does mime and mask and all of these different art forms that are related to physical, expression, physical performance. And yeah, I mostly, to be totally honest, I mostly went there because I had always known I wanted to live in France for a while. So that had always been a dream and on my bucket list. And so as soon as I turned 18, basically about 6 months after I turned 18, I moved there and did my certificate there, and then got to travel a little bit in Europe. And it was a really good, maybe cliche, but a really good kind of soul searching time when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and what path I wanted to take to get there. And it was while I was there that I kind of realized, like, for whatever reason, I'm feeling drawn to just go back to the US and get on set however I can. Because prior to that time, I had really just done theater, and I knew I was interested in film. And so that's what I did. I just moved back home and decided I'm going to do whatever I can to start learning about this and try to just kind of climb up baby steps up the ladder and learn everything I could. So yeah, that experience really just helped me kind of define what I wanted to do and helped me figure out the next steps.
That's so cool. Yeah, I spent some time while I was in college in Europe as well. I did spend a few days in Paris. I actually can't tell you that it was my favorite place in the whole world. I'm not a big city person. I was also there right after all the riots a few years ago, or actually kind of still during them a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
So the city was not in the best shape. So I can't say I can make a fully.
That sounds like a high.
Because it wasn't at its best. But I find that I'm not a city person, really.
To be honest, I am totally not either. I had a very idyllic, wonderful experience of Paris because my little school was in the suburbs south of the city. And when I say suburbs, suburbs of Paris, it's like this beautiful medieval town. It's not like what we think of as suburbs. It's this gorgeous town with these cobblestone streets. And I was really fortunate that I lived in this tiny, like, it's all I could afford, but teeny tiny little attic, like, Airbnb for the time I was there, and it was in a really lovely part of the city. And so I would just like ride the train out to the suburbs every day, and I felt like I had a really positive experience of Paris. But I'm very, very much like you. Like if I had to live long term in a city, I would not be able to do it. For short times, I love it, and there's so much culture and art and one amazing museums. that are so accessible. I mean, like, I was stunned that the Louvre, I think it costs like 10 euros or something to go to the Louvre, which is insane to me, because here where I live, it's like $30 to go to our art museum, you know? So I love how much art is available and accessible when you're in European cities, or at least in Paris. And but definitely to live long term, I'm much more a countryside, open spaces kind of girl.
I don't know if you've ever been to Italy, but some of the museums and the chapels there, my family is from Italy, and so we spent a
Oh, cool.
significant amount of time traveling there before I went to college. And it's
Awesome.
beautiful. I
My
don't recommend
fiance is
going.
Italian.
I don't recommend going when we went though. We went in like August,
Oh,
and you have to cover up to go into any of like the museums or the churches or whatever, to be like respectful of the culture.
interesting.
And I was a little sweaty. I was just put it that way. It was like 100 degrees every day.
Oh,
So
oh my
I
goodness.
recommend going in the spring or the fall, not in the dead of summer.
Got it. Got it. I'll remember that. I've never been to Italy. It's definitely on my list though. And my fiance is Italian, and his whole family on one side are Italian. And so we're definitely planning to spend time there in the future, but it's on my list.
Well, one thing and that we were talking about a little bit off camera that I had mentioned, some of the plant things that are going on.
Yeah, yeah.
You have expressed a couple of times on your social media like how impactful gardening is on your like kind of on a spiritual level. So I would love to know more about that, as I don't really have the best green thumb.
Hey, girl, I know the feeling. I always loved plants growing up. I loved nature in general. And my mom had a garden, and I would sometimes, you know, as a teenager and a kid, I would sometimes help. And I was never like a big gardener though. And once I moved from, you know, adolescence into adulthood, I just always felt like I didn't have time. You know, it's just one of those things that it's like, how can I possibly have a garden? Like, I can barely take care of myself. I can barely remember to give myself water every day. How am I going to remember to take care of these plants? And so it was something, you know, I always would have liked to have done, but just felt like I didn't have time. And it was last year, when the world shut down in March, that I realized, like, I've always, you know, wanted a garden and never had time. And now I have all this time and space in my life, and I don't know what to do with my energy sometimes, you know. And so I started one last year, and I kind of even then was a little nervous that, like, oh, this is just going to be a phase. It's going to be my pandemic phase, you know, and by like later this summer, it'll all be overgrown, and I won't have been able to maintain it. But that wasn't the case at all. I just like really fell in love with gardening, and I don't know, there's something about it that just is so soul nourishing. And you just, not it's not for everyone, you know, everyone has different hobbies that are this for them, but for me it's just very, it's not even just that it's relaxing, it's like it's actively, it's such an actively positive force in my life, because I feel like even in some small way I can make my world a little bit more beautiful. And I can, and sometimes certain things I'll have like a whole lot of, and I can share like my produce with friends and family, and that brings me a lot of joy too. And just like the beauty of having the blooms of flowers, or I have flowers and vegetables as well, but there's just so much about it that just really beautifies my world and my surroundings. And one of my favorite poets, I talked a little bit about this on Instagram as well, but one of my favorite poets talks a lot about beauty, and like the beauty of the natural world around us. And he said something, I can't remember how I'm sure he put it more beautifully than this, but he talks about how we think of certain things as a necessity in life: food, water, shelter, but never on that list is beauty. Like, we don't think of beauty, it's like a luxury, it's not a necessity. But he believes that beauty is absolutely a necessity for your spiritual and emotional well-being, for your health. And this particular poet, he's passed away now, but he was Irish, and he lived in like the countryside of Ireland, and just in this beautiful natural environment, and how much that affected him. And so I think about that a lot. And sometimes it's like, sometimes the best advice we can give others or ourselves when we're struggling is it's not always like you need to do more, you need to hustle, you need to, it's sometimes you need more beauty. Like, you need to surround yourself with beauty. You need to plant a flower. You need to go on a walk in nature. And so my garden, I guess what it's done has just allowed me to bring that like that beauty to my space and to my backyard. So it's been a really positive, nourishing thing for me. And I recently found that this may be what you're talking about, but I recently found a study that basically confirmed everything I had experienced with a garden, just that gardeners, even if their circumstances in life are still really tough, even if they're economically not well off or in other difficult circumstances in life, having a garden, they're many times more likely to have higher emotional well-being and happiness, higher levels of happiness in their life. So there's my pitch for planting a garden.
Yeah, I mean, on this podcast a lot, I've brought on people to talk about a lot of the different issues presented in the show, and one of those being just like personal mental health and struggles with like identity and depression. And we saw it in season 3, there was even like PTSD. And so always looking for a way to be able to heal yourself a little bit mentally, whether that be through gardening, through meditation. The other day I said, like every time I take my dog for a walk, like that is kind of for me a form of meditation where I'm like not thinking about anything else. But gardening actually brings in another aspect, and that is beauty, as you said. And creating a more beautiful world for yourself will hopefully open up a more beautiful place in your mind. You know what I mean? Like,
and there's so many, like gardening is just one way of doing that, but like for some people that might be interior design, which is not my strength. I've been struggling with that a lot. So if anyone wants to help me make my house more beautiful, that'd be great. But some people, that's the way that they dress. It's their wardrobe. That's their way to express beauty. And so there's so many different ways of doing it, but gardening is just one I found that's been really positive and nourishing in my own life.
Yeah, I love being able to, and again, because I don't know how I have a dog that I keep alive daily and I can't keep a plant alive. Maybe it's because she like yells at me when I don't feed her. I don't know. But I love cultivating and caring for another life. So maybe if I look at gardening that way, it'll work better for me. But it is also hard to do in a college apartment with
absolutely
little sunlight and no backyard.
Don't worry, you have the rest of your life that you can experiment with gardening if you choose.
Hopefully one day. I found my way of, I really like cooking as an expression of like
awesome.
An artistry form.
Yeah, that's absolutely an art form.
Growing your own like spices and basil and things like that would probably be really cool. And maybe even like some like fruits and vegetables or whatever you could grow. Like that'd be would be very cool if I could eventually do that.
Yes. You might love, I don't have it currently, but last year I had it's called an arrow garden. And it's actually just a little thing you can put on your kitchen counter, and it has like built-in lights. So you don't even need sunlight. And so last year I had like basil and parsley and dill. So you could just have a little kitchen garden right on your counter where you get fresh herbs. You need this.
I have to Google that. Oh my gosh. Okay. That made me so excited. Oh, my little heart just started beating so fast.
I loved it. I really loved it. And it does like, be prepared. The lights are pretty bright. They're like these bright fluorescents. So if it's like in your bedroom, it might keep you up at night because they're on like 12 hours a day. And it makes little like bubbly noises, kind of like an aquarium, because it's got water, like water that make the plants grow. But I loved it. Like I just watching them sprout and being able to get fresh herbs to cook with anytime I wanted it. Awesome. So you need this.
Oh, that is absolutely coming with me to every apartment that I have, because I foresee a few apartments in my future and not a house necessarily right away, especially with the career path I'm venturing down.
What are you venturing down? What's your career path?
I'm interested in sport communication. So working with sports teams, doing a lot of their internal communications and external. So like some PR type stuff, but also just like, when you like click on, I don't know if you know this or not, when you click on like a roster and they all have their bios and stuff, like updating those and things like that internally.
Gotcha.
So lots of different communication stuff. At one point, I wanted it to be this for sports, but this kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I find that on camera is not necessarily where I would like to be all the time.
Oh, really? Oh, well, you're doing so well at it.
Yeah, I equate that to years of training. But I really like working with athletes rather than being media for them, because there's a
Gotcha.
difference in the relationship that you can cultivate with the athletes and being a former athlete.
Mm,
I just have, so much appreciation for them, and I want to help them and create a positive experience for them in what they're doing. So
that's
I
awesome.
find that it's easier to do when you're actually in the office as opposed to
Yeah,
shoving a microphone in their face.
that makes sense. Well, good
But
luck.
thank you.
That's such an
I love
exciting,
doing this
unique
though.
career.
This is so much fun. I love podcasting and putting my voice out there
That's
and
awesome.
just sharing thoughts and opinions. And that's something that you do a lot on social media as well. You put a lot of just very complex ideas out into the world, and you get lots of feedback from people. And the one that I think made me be like, I have to reach out to her, is you're posing a question recently, and it was so complex, and it was about like, your inner gut feeling and your instincts versus the things that you were taught in your own life. So for those
Mhm.
of you who didn't see that on her Instagram, like, can you explain a little bit what you're talking about there?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how I phrased the question, but the basic idea was just curious of, um, curious to take a poll and see how most people were raised. And kind of the question was, were you raised being taught that your emotions should dictate how you make decisions and how you live your life? Or were you taught that your feelings can't necessarily be reliable, aren't necessarily reliable and shouldn't be trusted as like an authority for determining whether something is true or false? Um, and since your emotions aren't necessarily reliable, then were you taught that you needed to rely on data and verifiable information? Um, and so that was the basic question, was just which way of looking at your emotions were you raised with, and do you feel like it was helpful whichever way you were raised, and how does that affect your life now? And it was really interesting because primarily, not everyone, but primarily it did seem that whichever way people were raised, they they felt it was problematic in some way. The people who were raised to believe like your emotions, if you have a good feeling about something, that means it's true, that means it's right. Or if you have a bad feeling about it, it means it's not true. People who were raised like that, a lot of them were telling me how negative that was and how they've had to go through years of therapy to learn to not identify with their emotions, and that their emotions are just something that they can observe and that pass, but they don't have to like attach to it and give it power. And so there were a lot of people who felt that way, and then on the other side there were a lot of people who felt that they wished they had been empowered to believe their own like gut feelings, and they felt like they could have avoided a lot of pain and a lot of bad situations if they had just been able to trust themselves and their emotions more. And that they feel that there really is something to that gut instinct, and it's not just as simple as a feeling, and that's not necessarily reliable, but they wish they had been empowered to trust it more. And so yeah, it was just interesting to see, and it all of those responses kind of made me feel like, I mean, I already knew this is a very nuanced, complicated topic, but all of the responses kind of reaffirmed this idea that it's like, it's not necessarily just one way or the other. And there are actually very positive benefits to both ways when they're taught, in a balanced and healthy way. And there are negatives to both things. So I don't, yeah, there was at least one person that I think kind of felt like I was like baiting them, like I'm going to pose this question, and I know what's right. And once you answer it, I'm going to like show you why you're wrong. And that wasn't it at all. Like I'm just fascinated by it. And it's something that I think about a lot in my life. And so I was curious to see what other people's experiences were. And really what surprised me the most were just how many people are grappling with this exact thing. And all over the spectrum, some people are like, right in the midst of really wrestling with it, and it's something they're really struggling with. And other people are kind of more where I am, where it's like something they have been working through for a while, and they're, more open and don't necessarily feel like they know conclusively one way or the other. But yeah, that's the basic basic gist of what I asked. I don't know if you had any other follow-up thoughts or your own thoughts and experience with it.
Yeah, I'm very curious, and obviously I didn't see all of the responses, but how spirituality and religion play into those things. Because I feel like I wasn't raised in a super religious home, but I do feel like I got a good balance of those things, which I don't know if everybody did. I think, one of my parents is very much one way and one is the other. So I got a nice mix.
Gotcha. That's
But
good. I'm sure that helped.
Yeah, I do think about data and logic, and I'm a very logical person, but at the same time, if I have like a gut feeling, or and I think I said this in my response at one point, like there's this little thing where like you feel like the little hairs on your arms and on the back of your neck like stand up, and not in like there's someone watching me, something,
right,
some ominous thing, but almost like in a I know this is wrong, or I know this something is off kind of way.
yeah,
And trusting
absolutely.
that, especially with people. I feel like I've gotten I have a good gut instinct on reading people because of that, because obviously I look at it logically and I listen to the things that they're saying, but at the same time, you can kind of tell when something's not right.
I totally agree.
It was a very weird experience where that all kind of came to fruition for me. But I was trying to help somebody who was heavily intoxicated at the time that I knew that was on my floor. And I tried to help him. I tried to take him back to the dorms and get him safe and get him water and put him to bed and everything like that. And in his intoxicated state, he was thinking I was maybe doing something different. And I could tell, like I felt it. And like I said, the little hairs on my arm stood up, and I was like, I think I got to get out of here. Like, I think I got to leave.
Yes.
And yeah, like he tried to do that to multiple different people that night. And so I was right in leaving. And even though in my head, like the logical thing to do was to help this person, I was like, I can't stay and I can't help him, because if I stay, like, I feel like something bad is going to happen. So it was a good cross of like the logical thinking and me being like a caregiving kind of person, but also just knowing in my gut, like something was off.
Yeah. And I think that is, again, like there were so many people that responded with that, they felt that they had been harmed because they were taught to not trust their own voice. They weren't like empowered to trust themselves in that way. And for me, it wasn't so much that I mean, I won't go down this path yet, but there's so many things we could talk about this. But for me, oftentimes, because I was taught to, be compassionate and kind and non-judgmental, kind of what you're describing, you wanted to help this person, and that was what you believed was the right thing to do. Oftentimes it would come down to me kind of my shutting myself down and saying like, oh, I don't want to judge that person. I that could just be me. I'm sure but I've had multiple experiences now where I got very bad, whatever you want to call it, vibes, what you're describing, just a really bad feeling about someone. And later on that bad feeling would be confirmed, just like you experienced. And so I think there's something really valuable about being taught as a child that like you can trust that little voice, if you're feeling like you should get out of a situation. However, and this is where it gets really complicated. However, when you believe something with all your heart to be true, and you believe it so much that it's like part of your core identity, if you encounter information, like verified factual information that contradicts it, then you experience cognitive dissonance, which is extremely painful. I mean, it feels like your world is like crumbling, like you don't know what's up and what's down. And I think sometimes if you're taught too much to rely on emotion, then when you experience feelings like that, like cognitive dissonance and encountering new information that challenges what you believe, then you can automatically shut down and say, I'm getting a bad feeling from this, so therefore I need to run away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I think you have
so
to
that's
be open to other beliefs and not, you know, you can't be
yeah,
so steadfast in something that you feel. And this is different from getting like a gut feeling about like an individual, I think. But
yeah,
if you believe in something very, very strongly and you are presented with facts that prove that to be different, yeah, you can't run away from those things. You have to be open. You have to understand that it is a belief and that this is something that you're believing and it's not necessarily a fact. And you can't
yeah,
believe something into being factual. You have to open your
yeah.
mind to other people's beliefs. And a lot of that is probably where some of the divide in our country comes from, because people have
Yeah.
believed things into fact for themselves.
Right, right. And to the point where it's part of their identity. And once a belief is part of your core identity, it is really excruciating to face facts that contradict it, you know? So yeah, and there were several people who responded too, which I so appreciate everyone who weighed in because it just helped me see so many different perspectives. But there were several people who weighed in, as I told you, who had kind of worked through all these things, realized through therapy and other resources that like their emotions are not reliable, and that had helped them a lot. But one person did say, like, your feelings are just feelings. Your thoughts and feelings can't manifest anything. And while I totally completely agree with that in one sense, I don't really believe in the like I just thought every night for a month about getting $1 million check in the mail, and then I woke up and there was $1 million check in the mail. Like, I don't know, like that kind of mystical manifesting, I totally don't personally believe in. And hey, I'm open to being proven wrong, but I also do believe that your beliefs, your thoughts and your feelings and your beliefs do manifest things in a sense, because um when a few years ago, I did a yoga teacher training and became certified as a teacher. And we were studying these ancient texts. They're called the Vedas. And there was a parable. And basically the gist of the parable was that if you're walking through the forest at night and you see a coiled up rope on the ground, but you think it's a snake, like in your mind, it registers that it's a snake, your body and your nervous system is going to respond exactly as if it were a snake. It doesn't matter that it's actually just a rope. It responds to what? So, in other words, our body responds to our perceived reality, to what we believe is reality, not to reality itself. And so, in that way, I kind of disagree with the person who said, like, our emotions, our feelings, and our beliefs don't manifest anything, because they do. They manifest responses in our body. And then, because of our emotional state, we put that in some way, shape, or form, we put that out into the world. And then everything is constantly responding to what we put out, you know? So it's just such a complicated, complex thing. And I don't personally at this moment know, you know, what's the right answer, but it's just really interesting to engage with it and to think about it deeply and to hear different perspectives. So thanks for giving me airtime to to kind of process everything that I learned from that Instagram conversation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is a right or wrong answer to this question. I'd love to, if anybody has opinions on this, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it as well.
Yeah.
But it is such a complex topic, and I think it umbrellas out into so many other things like that affect this country every day. So like religion and
Yeah.
racism and things like that all come from a belief and a history of beliefs.
Right.
So
Right.
it's so interesting, you know, whether do you trust that? Do you look at the data and how do those merge and how do we come to some kind of understanding with each other? That's like,
Yeah.
I think at the end of that that path that you would take. So I don't know that anybody has the answer, honestly.
Yeah, but I think it's the more that people are thinking about these things and engaging with these topics, just the more awareness you have, and the more you're going to be able at least to differentiate, like, I'm experiencing this negative feeling. Is this because one of my beliefs are being challenged by facts, or is it because I'm having a feeling that I should leave a situation, just I'm getting a bad vibe or whatever you want to call it from a person, and maybe this feeling is here to protect me. Um, I think just the more that you're aware of it, the more power you have. So
Yeah. Um, are you the kind of person that like picks up on people's vibes and meshes with people based on like the energy they give off? Because I totally am like that. I don't know if you are.
yeah, I mean, I think that for a long time I kind of didn't let myself because of that. Like, I don't want to be judgmental. I don't want to be, you know what I mean? Of like, just me getting this bad vibe from this person is reflective of me. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It's always taking so much responsibility. And obviously I definitely don't want to be a judgmental person, but over time, just having those validating experiences, like, oh, like that person was doing really harmful things, and I was right to pick up on that. That's given me more confidence in my like radar,
Yeah.
when just feeling people's energy and their spirit, and yeah.
Yeah, I feel like at this point in my life, my experiences have led me to picking, especially now as I'm about to graduate and a lot of people are about to go in different directions, picking and choosing the people that I really care about staying in touch with almost, and
Yeah.
who are my college friends and who are going to be my life friends. And I'm basing that a little bit on just like energy and the way people make me feel. And I don't know if that's right
Yeah.
or wrong, but that's absolutely how I do it. And
Yeah.
that's
Well,
just
just
standard.
remember that your body is going to respond to how you feel and what you believe, not the actual reality. So I think that's actually when it comes to who you surround yourself with, that's really valuable, because how their presence affects your life and how it makes you feel, whether it's lifting you up or just even on a low level kind of tearing you down, then that's important, because of that, because your perceived reality is what matters on a like neurological, biological level,
Yeah. So kind of moving on from that topic a little bit, just because I feel like we can talk about it forever and never come up
We
with
could.
anything concrete. Um, One thing I wanted to ask you about, as someone who I've spent 4 years working on becoming a part of the media industry, and look and appearance and things like that have taken such a toll on me and a lot of other women that I know just mentally.
Mhm.
What is it like? I mean, you've been in the real world a little bit more than I have, as an actor, just kind of dealing with that every time you audition for something.
Mm. Yeah, just your appearance playing a role on whether or not you yeah, can even get in the door. Okay. Just want to make sure I understood the
Yeah.
question. I mean, obviously that's kind of an unavoidable just part of the industry. It's when you're telling stories through a visual medium, obviously it's like you have to fit a certain, you know, type to be right for the character. But there is such this emphasis, maybe particularly in American film, American media, in looking a certain way, and fitting this certain type. And that is really frustrating to me. I do think that the Me Too movement and so much of what's happened in the industry over the past 5 years has been critical and has really shifted the direction. And we are seeing, I think, at least in my perception, we're seeing more female-led films, and that's really inspiring and hopeful, because I think it just is going to open up more of diversity. Is not even quite the word I'm looking for, but it's just going to open up so many more possibilities for how someone can look to be a storyteller and how someone, because there are our audiences. I sometimes feel like there are the producers in media who think, oh, this is what's going to sell. This is what audiences are going to want. And I think time and time again, if you actually put content out there where people are looking different, where it is something unexpected that hasn't been done before, audiences actually are responding to that. And they are saying, no, we don't actually like this like slick kind of perfectly packaged Hollywood thing you're always selling to us, And so all of that to say, I do think that things are actually moving in a good direction. I obviously that pendulum can swing a lot, and we might take one step forward and then like three steps back, but it has to me felt like we've been moving in a good direction. And even just me personally, like my agent and my manager, I'm so fortunate to have great reps that like they know that I'm pretty hard lined about like I'm never going to change anything about my body unless it's something I want to do. I'm never going to change anything about my physical appearance because it would make me more castable or more marketable or any of that. It's just not what I'm about. I have no interest in that. I don't think that you need to look a certain way to be a storyteller. And even just the fact that there's a place for me in the industry to be able to say that, and that I can have two great, reps, my manager and my agent, be like, okay, like that's fine with us. We're still going to represent you. We still like what you're about, like even just that is really encouraging to me, because I don't think that's always been the case. And maybe I have a skewed perception because I got very lucky with my representatives. That definitely still happens in the industry. But I do think even just 10 years ago, maybe just 5 years ago, it was much more the case that it's like, hey, like if you're not kind of willing to do anything to be more marketable, to be more successful, more castable, then I'm sorry, that's just it. Like, then we don't want to work with someone who's not going to work, So generally, I have positive feelings about this, but it's definitely a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, so for me now, the past few years, watching my friends kind of go off into the job market, I've seen a lot of the girls be asked, and we're just in, the news telling business. We're not, trying to fit a specific character description in any sense, but I've seen things like, can you if we hire you, we need you to cut your hair shorter because it doesn't really fit our image of our newscasters to have long hair. Or if you see on like Fox News, a lot of times you'll only see the female anchors in dresses or skirts or something. They're kind of told don't wear pants because it's not feminine enough. And we're looking, the reason we're hiring you is so that you will be our female, like our, like, and there's something so off-putting about that, especially, being, trying to go into the sports world where it's very male dominated. And a lot of times I feel like I have something to prove, not just physically but mentally, of like my knowledge of things. I don't want to be told like how to dress or how to do my hair, or that I always have to have my full face of makeup on so that men will watch me talk about sports because I'm pretty. Like there's something so off-putting about that. And I know that it's present in the film and TV industry as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something like I hadn't even thought about, in your industry. Is even more frustrating in your industry because you shouldn't have to look a certain way. It's not, you don't have the justification of saying, oh, well, this character has to fit this certain description for the story to make sense, or, and that is kind of a shoddy justification in many ways, but no, that's got to be really, really, really frustrating. And I hope that the things that have happened in the film industry with the Me Too movement, I hope they're having ripples that will have positive effects, in other branches of media and just other industries in general. But yeah.
I'm curious, since you have read a lot of classic literature and have been involved in a lot of period work, because all of this is so new. What draws you to playing characters in those periods? Because I feel like there are a lot of empowered women in classic literature, but just in a way we don't necessarily recognize in the modern era as being empowered.
Yeah, that's a interesting, beautiful thought. I think as far as why I'm drawn to it, I don't even know if I have an answer. It maybe sort of goes back to the folk music and why I am drawn to that style of just, I think I like media from times past just because it reminds me of kind of how small my part in this collective human story is, and I don't mean that in a depressing way. I mean that in like such an affirming, nourishing way that like that I am part of something bigger and there's so much commonality between my life and lives that my ancestors lived 100 or 500 years ago in certain ways. Obviously in some ways our lives are very, very different, but the commonalities are really interesting and beautiful to me. And I think that's why I've always liked period pieces, being part of these period projects and also reading classics. And as far as, talking about there are sometimes empowered women in these stories just in a different way. That's actually something that is dear to my heart because so often I don't like that in our media. It's almost like we started writing these empowered female characters, but so often they feel like they are written by men and they're a man's idea of an empowered woman. It almost feels like we've started writing these more powerful female characters, but often that comes with like the caveat that in order to be an empowered female, you have to have masculine traits, if that makes sense. It's like somehow becoming more and more masculine is what makes you empowered, and being a little more blunt and rough around the edges, and that's what makes you a strong woman. And I don't actually believe that. I think you can be a strong woman and be totally feminine or very masculine or somewhere in between, and so often some of my favorite female characters from classic literature, whether it's like in Dickens or Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, are really like soft characters like Betsy. I feel like Betsy was still a strong character, even though she has such a small amount of screen time. But I don't think you have to be. I think you can be gentle and soft and still be strong and empowered. So I think I often find that in the female characters that I really love in my favorite classics and some old movies I love. And yeah, so I hope that answers that question.
No, it totally does. And I think it is interesting that the empowered woman has taken on such a rough around the edges, a little bit masculine exterior, and that is not the answer for everybody. Like
Yeah.
for me it is a little bit, and that was something that I think I was looking for as a kid. So it's nice to see more of those characters for me,
Yeah.
because it allows me to relate, but not to completely cancel out what it had been. And that,
Yeah.
there are
Absolutely.
absolutely empowered women who aren't like tomboys like me, what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so there's so many different ways to showcase it. And you're right,
Yeah.
there is, and I don't know that I've necessarily looked at it in that way, because to me, I'm seeing something similar to myself on the screen, so I'm not thinking too hard about it. But you're right, like that it has taken a turn towards almost being a monopoly of those kind of characters. So
Yeah, and not always, like now part of our world with all of this content, we have streaming and Netflix and, just so many different platforms. I do feel like there are more and more stories being told. And so it's harder and harder, and this is a positive thing, it's harder and harder to make generalizations like that and say like, oh, Hollywood just portrays women this one way, because there's more and more stories being made and different types of storytellers out there. And I, to be completely clear, it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with those like really tough, hardcore female characters. I think that's great. I think it's just like part of the goal of, feminism, in my view, is having space for all kinds, like all kinds, to be a strong woman, and to be portrayed that way in the media that we're being raised with when we're young. And so yeah, so I love that. And actually, to be clear, I may not come across this way, but I was very much a tomboy growing up, and and that's part of it. It's like we're all so we're all just kaleidoscopes of so many different qualities, and and we should be able to be all of that, and and be strong in our own way, and I don't think we need to fit a certain stereotype, to be seen as an empowered woman, or to be an empowered woman.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, as we head, we're getting, past the hour mark, and I want to make sure that we get everything in before you and I both have to go. So
Yes,
I
I did
want to,
just get a notif. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just going to tell you, my AirPods let me know that I have like 10% battery. So if they cut out, I'm so sorry.
no,
Hopefully
no,
they won't. But
no worries at all. I like to call this portion the shameless self promo portion, where you tell the people that are listening a little bit about some of the projects you're working on. It doesn't have to just be TV. It could be your music or your short films or whatever it is that you're most excited about. I will have everything that you say plus a little bit more linked in the description below. But yeah, shameless self promo time. Plug away.
thank you. So I recently worked on a Disney Plus series called Just Beyond. It's an anthology series, so I'm only in one episode. Each episode has a different cast. But that was such a fun project, and I think it's going to be released on Disney Plus later this year. So I would love that if everyone checks that out. And I also wrote and produced a short film a couple years ago. It's in French and German, so it's a foreign language short film. It's called Les Confinés, and if you go to my Instagram, you'll see it. I have a highlight for it. So if you're interested in watching it, you can click on that. I would love it if people check that out and give me their feedback and thoughts on it. And then let's see what else. I also have a sustainable, ethical, vintage inspired women's clothing line that we're getting ready to launch soon. It's my mom and sisters and I started it together. And it's called Rosie Company. And you can follow us on Instagram. It's Rosie Company Clothing. So if you're into that, if that's your jam, then I would love it if you check that out as well. And my music, you can find the link in my bio to my single Holy Magic on my Bandcamp. You can also just look up Emily Marie Palmer on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you listen to music. But if you go through Bandcamp, it allows people to kind of set their own price. I think the song costs $1, but you could do $2 or $5 or whatever the song is worth to you. And so that always means a lot when people support my music through Bandcamp. And I think that's it for now. Yeah, I kind of have a lot of irons in the fire and things in the work, but hopefully that covers everything.
Yeah, it seems like your Instagram is a hub for finding you and finding all your different projects. So that's gonna be up on the screen. So follow Emily on Instagram. I'm also gonna have your IMDb page linked so that anything that you're about to appear in, people can keep track of that as well. And the last thing that I want to ask you is something that I've been asking all of my guests, a challenge for you and me both, because I think in this time of COVID, people have definitely seen it as a negative. So I'm encouraging people to find the positives in it. And I may or may not know your answer, and it's totally okay if the gardening is your answer. But I want to know what the most positive thing to come out of the pandemic experience has been for you.
Honestly, I have felt really fortunate because I feel like in so many ways there have been positive things this year, and I know that has not been the case for everyone. And so I just feel so kind of ridiculously fortunate that I've had so many positive things. But honestly, one of them has been just forcing me to slow down. I am chronically overscheduled most of the time in my life. And so just being kind of forced for a while to stay at home and slow down, that was a huge force for good in my life. And also getting to spend so much time with the few people in my bubble, those few loved ones. I've just had such those relationships that were already really close and really deep have just deepened even more, and that's been another huge positive. So yeah, I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, my challenge is a little bit different. So this is now like the 12th time I think I've done this, and each time I'm supposed to say something that I haven't said yet. That way at the end of all of this podcasting, I can accumulate a list of just all of the positive things that have happened to me. So I can look at this in a great way. So I feel like all my best answers are gone, but that's not true because all of them are best answers.
Yes.
So something that I don't think I've said yet. I did a lot of reading. And as a kid, I used to read all the time. Like, in elementary school, I was that kid that came in with my book list and I had read like 60 books in a year. And everybody else is like, oh yeah, I read 5. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, no, I'm not weird or anything. But
that's awesome.
I rediscovered a love of reading. I feel like in late high school and college life, just, anytime I was reading, it was a school issued thing. And reading for pleasure had become, something that I picked up on. Reading new books as well as revisiting books that I read as a kid and just falling in love with reading again.
I love it.
Yeah, so that was definitely a positive for me. I don't think I would have thought I ever had the time to pick up a book ever again. Yeah, the only time I read anymore other than in this pandemic was like audiobooks on my drive up to school. Which is not the same to me. I love having like my physical copy of my book. At some point, my mom bought me one of those e-readers, and it just it wasn't the same experience for me.
Right.
It's super easy to carry with me, but also like I love having the physical book.
I totally understand. When I went to Paris, so we talked about I had an entire little suitcase full of books, which is so ridiculous. Like, I could have just gotten an e-reader, but I'm right there with you. It's just not the same as having your physical book.
Yeah. People make fun of me because I say that I don't cry while watching like TV and movies and stuff. I'm not ever really moved to tears watching it. But when I read a book, I'll be moved to tears. And it doesn't make any sense because you would think seeing it on the screen would invoke that feeling in me. Don't know why it doesn't, but there's something about reading and seeing it in your head. And maybe that's like the creative person in me where I'm like, oh, I would have done it this way, or I would have liked to see this instead. So when I'm imagining it in my head, I'm not focused on those details.
It's perfect.
And I can move myself and explore the emotions on a deeper level. But I love reading. I encourage those youngsters out there to not shy away from books because
I second that. Reading is great.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. I loved our discussion today. I really did.
Thank you so much, Toni. Thanks for having me on, and keep doing what you're doing. This is awesome. Like I said, I was so excited to see a female-led podcast in this space talking about Cobra Kai, and really, really great to talk with you, and good luck in your career and finishing school. That's super exciting. You're about to graduate. So that's a huge accomplishment.
Nerve-wracking. Yes. So everybody follow Emily. Like I said, everything is going to be linked below. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Toni. Have a great day.